Right, but the daughter is trans, so everybody is like mad about it.
But Cabaret Neil Patrick Harris is fine to them?
Yeah, it's not a cohesive worldview.
God damn it. I forgot it was Monday again.
Hey, Cecil. Hey, Noah.
Seriously, Tom, sled dogs?
Yeah, okay. In my defense, these were still here from the last time we did a South Pole episode, so...
No, Tom, those are new ones.
Where'd you buy new sled dogs?
I got a guy.
Got a guy, yeah.
Okay, I get it. We turned our podcast studio into the Arctic and Antarctic wasteland for this week's episode, so can we please put everything back so we could maybe record a show?
Yeah.
Fine, yeah.
Okay.
Sure.
I'll get the hair dryers.
How did you guys even do this anyway?
Oh, we just opened a window last night. Came in and it was like this in the morning.
Right. Yep. Chicago.
Chicago. Exactly.
Hello and welcome to Citation Needed, the podcast where we choose a subject, read a single article about it on Wikipedia, and pretend we're experts. Because this is the internet, and that's how it works now. I'm Eli Bosnick, and I'll be tobogganing the tundra as your host this evening, but I'll need some road dogs instead of some sled dogs. First up, the Black Ice, Powder, and Slush, Cecil, Noah, and Heath.
Black Ice is an amazing rapper name for someone else. Somebody else gets that one.
Yeah, actually, Eli had to give up on the powder after the heart attack, actually.
Spoil sport.
And if you drink me too fast, I give you a headache. So nice.
That's true. Very true. And also joining us tonight, a puddle that's about to show us it's way deeper than it looks. Tom.
Yeah, still a puddle. Yeah, still but know thyself. Still very much a puddle.
Fair. Before we begin tonight, I'd like to take a moment to thank our patrons. Patrons, if it weren't for you, Tom would have to do the opening monologues of his essays to a therapist, and that costs money. So if you'd like to learn how to join their ranks, be sure to stick around till the end of the show. And with that out of the way, tell us, Cecil, what person, place, thing, concept, phenomenon, or event will we be talking about today?
Today we're going to be talking about the Terra Nova expedition.
And Tom, you plumbed the icy depths of history for yet another cold exploitation tale. Are you ready to chill us to the bone?
To not do so would be abominable.
All right, Tom. What was the Terra Nova expedition?
Well, Eli, sometimes
Jesus
sitting
Christ.
on the dock and looking out over the water, one's thoughts inevitably turn to travel, exploration, and, of course, to spite.
We got to take away his doc.
I'll just imagine it. Sure, the human impulse to see and map and chart every corner of the world is almost certainly a primal one, but more primal indeed is the desire, nay, the need to succeed not for oneself, but to spite our enemies and competitors. And if there is any story in the history of doomed expeditions that best exemplifies that urge to outcompete, to one-up, to, in fact, shall we say, Heath our way into the history books and a cold, wintry grave, it is the story of the doomed Terra Nova expedition. And before anyone else checks, I looked, and I managed to refrain from telling a tale of icy doom for several years now. And I have known about this story for all of that time, and I held off from telling it, but I cannot hold off any longer.
From now on, I'm just cutting every opening paragraph from the show and just replacing it with white noise. That's what I'm doing.
Well, I'm just sad you don't get a didn't tell a tale of icy doom on your star chart this week, Tom. I mean, that's,
Don't listen. They are just jealous of your context, Tom.
No,
they are
thank you,
jealous.
Noah.
No.
Thank you. The Terra Nova expedition was led by Robert Falcon Scott.
See, now that's how you start the essay. You cut that one off, and you just go, the Terra Nova expedition, right
but
there.
then you wouldn't have the heartfelt
Right, you need an
moment,
editor.
Cecil,
You
without
need an
context.
editor so bad.
You're the editor. Do your job.
I
Maybe
will.
this is a. Maybe
Don't
this is,
dare
this
me.
Is on you.
Don't
I feel
you
like this is
fucking
on
dare
you.
me, Tom.
You're calling yourself out right now.
Guys, did you notice Citation Needed is 22 minutes long now?
The Terra Nova expedition was led by Robert Falcon Scott, who had previously led the successful Discovery expedition from 1901 to 1904. And when Scott, or as I am now determined to rebrand him, Falcon, returned from the Discovery expedition, He resumed his career in the Navy, but his heart was still tied to the frozen South.
Men will do anything but go to therapy, huh? Just anything but.
How do you not call yourself Captain Falcon?
Right?
if
Thank
have
you.
Falcon in your
Oh,
name and
yeah.
you're a captain. That's crazy.
This whole essay, he is Falcon, in my heart, he is Falcon. The Discovery Expedition hadn't actually made it all that far south, and it stopped shy of the Great Ice Barrier. Falcon had always intended to return. But in 1909, his plans sped up dramatically when he learned that Ernest Shackleton had crossed the Great Ice Barrier and penetrated to within 100 miles of the South Pole. Falcon was, to say the least, unhappy. You see, Falcon and Shackleton knew one another, and Shackleton had kind of pinky sworn he wouldn't just take a boat down to where Falcon had last left off based on what the world had just learned about that area, and then trudge a little further afield than Falcon had. But that is precisely what Shackleton had done. Falcon swore he would return to the Antarctic and show up that showboating Shackleton and achieve even more being desperate and cold than the other guy.
Okay, just go to a football game in December shirtless and paint your chest like a reasonable adult if you want to do stuff like that.
Yeah, I feel like this is going to be the last time anybody would hear about Shackleton going to Antarctica and going, that lucky bastard.
Since this was the early 1900s, it was kind of a race to the bottom, much like we are working on now with our embrace of late-stage capitalism. But back then, it was a race to the bottom of the world rather than toward the implosion of civil society. The Japanese were planning an expedition, as well as the Mawson expedition, which we've already talked about on this show, and the Norwegians were making preparations. And now, if you're wondering, Tom, why is everyone so obsessed with seeing what the most southern ice and snow looks like? Is there suspected to be gold or oil or precious resources at the pole? Was there perhaps a southern version of Santa Claus rumored to be making real dolls for all the good little heaths of the world? No. The race to the South Pole is very similar to the race to Mars or to the moon. This was in many ways a technological and scientific race, as well as just a bit of a chest thump. And our guy Falcon was determined to beat them all to the butthole of the world.
Bunch of incel explorers complaining that all the mountains nearby have been climbed by some guy named Chad. So they're heading out somewhere else.
South Pole Santa does naughty and nice flip because south, right?
Right.
That's what you guys are-
That's exactly right.
Yeah. I'm picturing a Spanish accent for him. I don't know why. Ooh, naughty.
Caliente.
That's not how they say that.
The Wikipedia article has a heading that describes the crew, and fans of my essays on doomed expeditions, and I know they number in the perhaps 5s or 6s of you, will be disappointed to know that everyone really seemed actually pretty competent. Nowhere is the usual motley crew of like bohemian poet lumberjack dressmakers appointed as the navigator or, perhaps a first mate who's stowed away in someone's hardtack hot pocket or whatever. No. Instead, everyone seems, honestly, really well chosen and qualified. And a bunch of them had experience being super fucking cold already, with the perhaps notable exception of one guy named Apsley Cherry Gerard, who popped his way into the expedition by donating a bunch of money to the project and triumphantly bought himself one Titan of a ticket south.
Okay, I get it, but I feel like the entire crew could be like just Iditarod winners and award-winning coldologists, and it still goes very, very bad.
Yeah, exactly. If you want someone prepared to go to the South Pole on a wooden sled before GPS exists, get me a major depressive, right? That guy's prepared.
Okay, it might just be arrogance, but after 27 years of Lucinda putting her feet on me when we go to bed, I feel like I can handle this. I feel like these guys have nothing on me.
And of course, the expedition was going to need some way to actually move all the gear and food from pointless A to pointless B. And Falcon chose a combination of sled dogs, ponies, and motorized sledges. You heard that right. Yes, I said ponies. And so I looked this up, and it turns out that ponies are hardier little beasts than I had imagined.
Oh, I've imagined some extremely hardy ponies. Tom.
Little ones, perhaps?
And mine, all mine.
Good Lord. That's fucking gross.
All right. Well, ponies are well adapted to harsh conditions, such that you might find on the plains or the steppes, where it does indeed get quite cold. But I also looked it up, and there are no ponies found in Antarctica because it is an inhospitable wasteland that isn't meant to be fucking traversed, except by penguins. And I guess if any of you are not now picturing a team of penguins pulling a sled, that you're missing out.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, I was picturing a very sophisticated penguin with a motorized sledge license, but similar.
Okay, first I pictured some asshole tying a bunch of penguins to a sled and being like, yeah, fuck, they're not, this is nothing. They're not going anywhere. But then I pictured the penguins actually going with their like penguin walk, and the sled goes like 10 feet, like a wind up toy, while everything shakes off the side. And then he's like, fuck, this is nothing.
And with regard to the motorized sledges, you might remember an essay I wrote when a Nazi tried to take motorized sledges through Canada, and that did not work. And like it didn't work out a whole lot, and for many similar reasons, motorized sledges didn't have a successful history in the Antarctic to date. Shackleton had tried them a few years earlier, and they were only marginally useful. And if you've ever struggled to start your car in the winter or find a gas station in the middle of the Antarctic, well, you would understand why. And to briefly return to the ponies thing, the guy who was in charge of buying the ponies, he didn't know shit about ponies. So he bought a bunch of them that were like old and like out of shape. They were like podcaster ponies.
And they were ponies. So like they stepped off the boat, immediately the ponies disappear into the snow. And they're like, okay, tiny horse was a bad idea, apparently.
I just love the idea of Steve shoving a bunch of pink ribbons and hairbrushes into his backpack. Of course I know what makes a good pony. What kind of idiot do you guys think I am?
So in June of 1910, the main ship, the Terra Nova, set sail, but without Falcon. Falcon was soon to follow, but he was detained by some fundraising bullshit he had to deal with, and they had, I guess, already announced the final boarding group. The ship set sail to New Zealand, while Falcon stayed behind trying to rustle up some more dough in Melbourne. And it was there that Falcon learned that the Norwegian expedition was proceeding south. The expedition to the South Pole was now a race.
A race that was between the speeds of light jog and mall walker. Yeah, a race.
Sometimes slower. Scott joined up with the Terra Nova in New Zealand, and they headed south in a very overloaded ship. So overloaded, in fact, that when the ship encountered a storm and rough seas, the boat immediately began to take on water. And the pumps, which were made to handle exactly this situation, failed. And so the crew had to literally bail the ship out with buckets to keep it from sinking. And although they succeeded in not sinking, before they were even in sight of Antarctica, they had lost 2 ponies, 1 sled dog, 10 tons of coal, 65 gallons of fuel. It was not a great start. But it pretty much immediately got worse because they then hit pack ice and got stuck for 20 days before breaking free, and that delay resulted in wasting yet another 6 tons of extra coal.
Tom, listen to me. I don't know much, but I know our audience. You kill as many ponies as you want in this essay. You go ahead and have a full-on pony potato famine if you need to. But if you kill another dog in this story, we're going to have a riot on our hands, just so you know. Just change us so you know.
Yes. Good to know. Good to know. I'm trying to figure out how you're bailing out a ship and you lose ponies. Right? Did they not check the bailing buckets for ponies beforehand? What the hell?
But the delays were over. The ship made land, or what passes for land in the frozen South, on the 4th of January in 1911. And they had sailed to Cape Evan, which Falcon himself had discovered on his discovery voyage a few years prior. And the hope was that that cape would be free from the worst pack ice during the summer months and allow the ship access in and out to move supplies on shore. And that when winter came, the ice would allow the voyagers access to the Great Ice Barrier. Now, Falcon wasn't just in a race to the pole, but was also supposed to do a bunch of science stuff, like take readings of how cold the cold was and how windy the windy wind was. So one of the guys took the ship and he went on exploring, and he ventured out to do some of that science stuff, and they actually ran into Amundsen, the leader of the Norwegian voyage that they were racing against. They bumped into each other in the frozen, empty wastes of Antarctica. And when Falcon learned of this, he initially wanted to sail out to Amundsen, and I am not kidding, he wanted to fight him.
Hey, boss, I could see you getting mad already. Can we just do the science thing and just
I hate that guy so much.
Don't say pop in the shirt. Don't.
Pop in the shirt.
Okay.
Falcon punch.
You got to be cold.
Falcon
We're not
punch.
spelling out Falcon on our chests, man.
All right, but fighting Amundsen in the Antarctic for exploring a little faster is fucking insane. and being a hothead probably doesn't last in the bitter cold. So instead, he resolved to, quote, proceed exactly as though this had not happened, to go forward and do our best for the honor of our country without fear or panic, end quote.
Sir, I shall meet you in the South Pole where we will handle this like gentlemen in an epic rap battle.
And so they proceeded with their plan, which was to lay a series of depots on the Great Ice Barrier that they could use on their journey out and back, with the largest known as the 1-ton depot. The laying of these depots was essential to the success of the mission, but also to their survival. But they pretty much immediately ran into problems. Yeah, Oates, the guy in charge of the pony situation and also in a huff about the Norwegian expedition, chose not to use the Norwegian snowshoes that they had brought along for the ponies out of like anti-Norwegian spite.
I like Pepsi. Fuck.
And this slowed things down considerably because of fucking course it did. And the 3-day blizzard that hit them and stalled out any work didn't help either.
Okay, just call them freedom shoes, dude. It's cold out here, okay?
Okay, rewind. The guy in charge of the ponies is named Oates. That is fucking adorable. Get the fuck out of here.
Well, that's probably how he got the job, right? Because he didn't know what he was doing. They were like, well, I bet Oates probably knows about ponies. He's like, fine, guys, damn.
Why does he have a bunch of pink brushes? That's fine.
After the weather broke, Falcon decided to send the 3 weakest ponies back to the base camp. But weak ponies don't get stronger trudging north instead of south, and so they just died. And as the depot depositing crew made their way slowly southward, Falcon began to worry that the ponies were all just going to die, but he had himself a plan. See, the plan was to just let the ponies die, and then to eat them when they fell because, you know, ponies were a stupid fucking idea in the Antarctic in the first place. And the crew continued their work, but the task proved slower and more difficult than they had planned. And the final and largest depot, 1-ton depot, was laid 30 miles short of where they had originally planned.
Okay, just once in one of these snow stories, I want someone to quit. Just one guy when the haft comes off at the shank 3 miles out of port to be like, oh, hey, never mind. We just do this later or not. Who fucking cares? There's nothing down there. I'm out. Just one.
And now that the depots were laid, the crew had to return to base camp. But even that proved to be just a complete bitch. A team of sled dogs plunged into a crevasse.
Tom?
Notre Dame forced Falcon to risk his life to save them, and he did, and he retrieved the supplies.
Okay.
And when the remaining crew with the remaining ponies were crossing the sea ice near base camp, well, the ice began to break up underneath them, and then they ended up with, like, pony popsicles, despite their best efforts to save them.
Artex!
Such a sad moment. Fuck.
So
sad.
man.
Weird thing to put in the kids' movie. We'll
Right.
talk-
That's
it's,
so weird.
I'll end this whole essay and talk about weird, sad, and scary shit they put in our movies for no reason.
By the time the crew had laid the depots and returned to the base camp, only 2 ponies were still alive. And the crew hunkered down in their shelters to wait out the brutal Antarctic winter.
One of the ponies is still really upbeat about the whole thing. He's like, man, really got lucky today, huh? What do you think, Paul? Shut the fuck up, Steve, okay? I'm having a nervous
Sorry.
breakdown
Sorry.
here.
I like that we're small, right? And hardy. Seriously, why did they do okay, they're hardy, but like tardigrades are hardy, but like you don't bring them to like pull sleds in the Antarctic.
If you brought a lot, you should. They were great. Surface in the sun.
Well, you could if you had
What?
like Norwegian tardigrade shoes. Like it would work better. Yeah.
Oh.
Okay, that's adorable, though. I feel like the image of that
That would
is
be,
pretty
it'd be cute. Little.
When you eat them, you could have steak tardigrade. Delicious.
Ah.
Do you remember before when I mentioned the mini expedition that bumped into the Norwegian explorers? After reporting the whereabouts of the Norwegians to Falcon, a smaller crew led by a guy named Campbell took the Terra Nova and sailed north to a different cape, and they became known as the Northern Party. And after spending the winter of 1911 in their hut, the crew was determined to set sail again in exploration, but instead they just got stuck in the sea ice and the sea ice pack, and they couldn't find an acceptable route out. And instead they were transferred to yet another cape a couple of 100 miles away called Evans Cove, where they were supposed to do some geologic-y science stuff. And the Terra Nova just sailed away, but when it came time to return, the condition of the ice pack made it impossible for them to reach the men in return. These guys had not anticipated being unable to get an Uber, and they didn't have nearly enough snacks. And although they supplemented their rations with seal meat and fish, things got pretty rough. And soon enough, the summer of 1911 gave way to the winter of 1912, and the guys had to carve out and huddle inside of an ice cave to survive. They were beset by frostbite, dysentery, and extreme hunger, and despite the horror of their conditions and the weakness that followed, they managed to survive the winter and eventually make their way back to base camp.
Dysentery Ice Cave sounds like the worst ride at Epcot Center. Like the very worst one.
Guys, when I shit, it freezes before it hits the ground. So cool, right?
Shut the fuck up, Steve!
Why did we buy talking ponies?
Paul, this is a real dog and pony show.
How dare you? I'll push you off the boat so hard.
And then another crew set off from the main group to do some other hard sciencing. And this time, I love this one. It's to retrieve the eggs of emperor penguins. But not just any old eggs. They wanted to get the eggs at a specific point in their embryonic development so that the life cycle of the bird could be better understood. So keeping in mind that this was the goal of this side quest, here's what these men endured so you could one time skim a zoo book on penguins and forget everything you read about that.
Fuck you, Tom. Cecil treasured the only book his family had till they had to burn it for heat. He treasured that book.
God. They would need to travel.
That's not funny. That's just not funny. It's mean. Very mean. We sold that book to turn the heat back on. It's not even accurate. Stupid.
Obvious.
To do this, they would need to travel during the peak of the Antarctic winter, something which had never previously been attempted for very obvious reasons. The crew would have to travel 60 miles to the penguin colony. They would have to face temperatures as low as 77 below zero in the darkness, their clothes and gear covered always in sheets of ice, and many days the furthest that the group would travel would be a mile in a single day.
No wonder penguins aren't scared of us. The first time they saw us, we were half-starved, slow-motion, crazy people shitting out half-digested pony as icicles.
That's pretty scary.
That is... And still, despite that, they reached the penguin colony and they built themselves an igloo made of snow, stone, and I love this, a sheet of wood that they lugged with them for 60 miles for the route. And it's a good thing they did because a storm blew up pretty much immediately with sustained winds in excess of 60 miles an hour. But hey, they got those penguin eggs after the storm subsided and they headed back to camp. And 3 of the eggs actually survived this whole thing. And they ended up at the Natural History Museum in South Kensington.
Yeah, I'm not sure like the official excuse for what happened to the rest of the eggs, but I'm betting whoever first formulated it did it with a mouthful of omelet, right?
Cherry Gerard described the experience as, quote, the worst journey in the world, end quote, while Falcon declared the winter journey, quote, a very wonderful performance. But penguin egg, as important as they very obviously are, were only part of the goal, because now it was time for the crew to head south to the pole.
For bacon and English muffins.
Fuck yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, while Heath tries to come up with a penguin/eggs Benedict pun, we'll take a little break for apropos of nothing. Don't do that.
Amundsen,
Oh my gosh. Robert Falcon. Funny running into you.
you son of a bitch.
Right? Sorry, you forgot you're a psychopath. Sorry, Robert, what's the matter?
No, like you don't know. You and I are in a race to the bottom of the world. Do you dare show your face in my path?
I mean, there's literally just the one port to sail out of, man.
Yeah, likely story. Come then. Fisticuffs.
No, Robert, not gonna fist fight you for, I don't know, the South Pole or whatever you have in mind. What do you even imagine we're fighting over?
Glory! Glory, a name! The bottom of the very globe!
Okay, right. Well, you can have all of that stuff, man. I'm just gonna take some measurements, maybe a few pictures.
You are?
Yeah, man. I'm a scientist. We're not in a weird race. We're just trying to figure things out. I don't know.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can I ask you a question?
Sure, man. We're on the same team. I'm happy to help.
Yeah, so listen, how many ponies have you eaten?
None. Man, I've eaten none ponies.
Right, yes. Yeah, of course, me too, none. None too, me.
Sounds like you ate at least one pony.
Fight me! Fisticuffs!
Still-
Ha!
Still no.
Yeah.
And we're back. When we left, it was cold out there. It's cold out there every day. Tell us, Tom, what happened next?
Eggs, ice, Florentine.
There it is.
Nicely done.
We actually took a 27-minute break while he screamed.
I had to deal with a nosebleed and an ear bleed, and then here we are. We're back.
The journey south was to consist of 16 men with 2 motorized sledges, the remaining ponies and dogs. And the goal was for the men, animals, and machines to make their way to the Beardmore Glacier, at which point they'd kill the ponies, send the dogs home, and the men would continue without the aid of the animals or motorized sledges across the treacherous glacier, broken into 3 groups of 4 men. And as they journeyed, Falcon would choose the strongest of the teams to continue to the South Pole, while the other 2 groups would be sent back at specific latitude.
Okay, Tom, I appreciate your effort, but they killed the ponies and sent the dogs home. Was that to a farm upstate by any chance? The dogs?
Noah.
I had to
shut
assume
up.
they were like homing dogs or something. I don't know if that's the thing. So the motor party set off with the goal to bring supplies ahead of the others and then to wait for the slower groups to catch up to the supplies. But after just 50 miles of travel, both of the motor sledges broke down. And then the men had to haul these 740 pounds of supplies 150 miles across the ice manually, which took 2 weeks.
Jesus.
And when Falcon, who was with the dogs, was reunited with the motor sledge guys, who were now just guys, the plan had been to send the dogs back to base camp. But since they didn't have motor sledges and they were behind schedule, they decided to take the dogs further along, and they carried onward until a blizzard struck. And the men were stuck for another 5 days waiting out the blizzard. And they were chewing through their rations without progressing forward toward their next supply depot. The remaining ponies were shot as planned, and the meat was buried for use on the return trip.
Yeah, they just stick their forelegs up in the air and you put a flag on one of them. Easy to find.
So this is why Cecil is a master of his craft, listeners. Tom's setup for our comedy podcast was, and then they shot the ponies and hoped that they wouldn't freeze to death before they could eat the ponies they just shot. And Cecil, consummate professional that he is, goes, I think that's close for a visual gag. Okay, visual gag it is. Well done, sir.
16 days later, the party began the ascent of the Beardmore.
The ancient city of Antarctic dwarves.
And they reached the upper glacier depot they had left previously planted. Falcon sent back to base camp 4 of the men with the dogs to wait for the party's return, and the remaining 8 men continued south. A couple of days later, in much better conditions, the men having made good progress, Falcon declared that 5 men, including himself, would continue ahead, and 3 men sent back to camp. In considerably better spirits, Falcon and his 4 companions pushed forward until 7 grueling days later, they spotted, 15 miles in the distance, the black flag planted in the center of the South Pole because the Norwegians had beaten.
Hey, boss, I see a flag in the distance. It says, sucks to suck? What is that? I don't know what that means.
Can I fist fight it? Can I fist fight the flag?
Don't pop the shirt. He's not even here. What are you
Popping
doing?
it.
Ah.
Now, the next day, Falcon and his men reached the pole stuck in the pole. He wrote in his journal, quote, the pole, yes, but under very different circumstances from those expected. Great God! This is an awful and terrible place for us to have labored to it without the reward of priority. Well, it is something to have got here, end quote.
He's like, damn it, now we won't get a citation needed episode unless everybody dies.
And then This next part makes me realize that I've never been really competitive about anything, because he realized he might still beat Amundsen back and so ruin the moment by being the first to break the news to the world. Quote,
I seriously, as soon as you wrote that, like, they beat him, Norway beat him, I was like, oh, no, now you just have to go kill him. You just have to race him back and you're fine. You got this.
He wrote, quote, now for a desperate struggle to get the news through first. I wonder if we can do it. So the guys double checked their position to make sure that the flag was really in the right spot. It was. And they planted their second flag and the crew began the return.
Okay, technically, if we plant the flag right on top of their flag, that's further south, right? Technically.
We got to jump when we do. We got to jump. The first 3 weeks went really well as far as their daily progress was concerned, but one of their guys, Edgar Evans, began to break down. He was suffering from extensive frostbite and was, quote, a good deal run down, end quote. And Oates, the guy who bought all the old and out-of-shape ponies they were eating, he wasn't doing much better, as his feet were beginning to become a problem. The group made their way back up and over Beardmore, but they struggled to find the depot they had left behind, probably because everything everywhere was a featureless white expanse of remorseless void.
They got it all the way to Iowa? Crazy.
The Republican National Convention? What?
But I have to admire, I don't know, maybe not admire, but perhaps gape slack-jawed at the optimism or the stupidity or the chutzpah of these guys, because even though they were hungry and freezing and dispirited, they were still like really trying to do some sciencing. During a brief half-day's rest called by Falcon, Wilson, the geologist, dug up 30 pounds of samples and added those to their sled. At this point, I would be ditching everything in that sledge I couldn't eat or wear or start a fire with, but these fucking guys added 30 pounds of fossils to their sleds, and those plant fossils would actually later help to prove the theory of continental drift. It was a lot more interesting than the penguin guys thing. Now, anyway, fossils or no, the guys, they were just falling apart. Evans had fucked up his hand. He banged his head pretty bad after several falls on the ice, likely due to his feet being frozen clubs of flesh. And in his typically stoic fashion, Falcon wrote, quote, he has absolutely changed from his normal self-reliant self, end quote. Evans died at the bottom of the glacier that same day, but in fairness, he didn't need anyone's help to do it.
Yeah, just Falcon holding a chubby penguin over his head, shushing him as he dies. You know?
That's how I want to go. Will you do that for me, Cecil? Please?
Right? Okay, so just for the record, want to point it out, injury and or disability has a sort of universal way of making people less self-reliant. This is something that Falcon and Republicans have trouble with, apparently. I just want to put it on the record right now.
The 4 remaining men were anticipating meeting the dog teams at the next depot, and the guys knew this was a crucial moment. Quote, we are naturally always discussing the possibility of meeting the dogs, where and when, etc. It is a critical position. We may find ourselves in safety at the next depot, but there is a horrid element of doubt, end quote. And that doubt would prove to be well-founded, because at the depot, there were no dog teams. And then the weather changed with a brutal drop in temperatures, which changed the ice so that it was, quote, coated with a thin layer of woolly crystals, formed by radiation, no doubt.
That's snow. He's describing snow. I've seen that stuff before.
These are too firmly fixed to be removed by the wind and cause impossible friction on the sledge runners, causing the sledges to feel like they were being pulled over desert sand, end quote.
Fuck, we should have brought very silly small camels instead of the ponies. Stupid.
How hardy are they, though? It's how hardy. And remember Oates' foot? Because that wasn't getting any better, and the slow pace that was required as a result meant that they were running out of oil. It had also become clear that the dogs were not only not there, but they were not coming. Quote, the dogs, which would have been our salvation, have evidently failed.
It's weird to put this failure on the dogs, man.
Yeah, fucking dogs.
Mears, the dog driver, had a bad trip home, I suppose, end quote.
Good.
But Falcon also admitted that maybe he had just fucked up. In a letter, he wondered whether he had biffed the meat, though he also began to suspect that maybe they had just been abandoned. Quote, we very nearly came through, and it is a pity to have missed it. But lately I have felt that we have overshot our mark. No one is to blame.
Are you sure about that, boss?
It's nothing that could have been done. Nobody could have waited until fucking space heaters existed. Everyone did exactly the right things, and no one fucking bought some ponies.
And I hope no attempt will be made to suggest we lacked support, end quote. That same day, Oates told Scott, I'm going to go outside and may be some time. He walked out into the wasteland and never returned.
And then they built a memorial there for him, the Hall of Oats.
Do you think he was super badass about it, or do you think he was weird and ASCII the way I would be? Right? Like, I'm going to take a quick walk out into the tundra.
Yep, got it.
So don't wait up.
Yeah, we're not.
Bye.
Have a good time.
Here I go.
Yeah.
20.
You want me to help with the
19.
Close it on the way out. It's chilly.
18.
Yeah.
I'm going to push him.
The remaining 3 men moved considerably faster without Oates.
Don't even think about it, you guys, okay? Don't even think about it.
But now Scott's feet were starting to succumb to frostbite. 11 miles away from the largest of their depots, the 1-ton depot, the 3 were again forced to stop when another blizzard forced them into shelter. For 9 days, they tried to leave their shelter and continue on, but each day, the ferocity of the blizzard forced them back inside. And on March 29th, 1912, Falcon recorded the last entry in his journal, quote, every day we've been ready to start for our depot 11 miles away, but outside the door of the tent, it remains a scene of whirling drift. I do not think we can hope for any better things now. We shall stick it out to the end, but we are getting weaker, of course, and the end cannot be far. It seems a pity, but I do not think I can write more. R. Scott. Last entry. For God's sake, look after our people. End quote.
Cool. We'll do that by not sending them to the coldest place on Earth until we have shit like GPS. Is that okay? Can we do that?
Yeah, it's a weird request after you just killed off your whole crew.
So what happened? Well, it's not super clear, but it does seem that the dog guy, Mears, after separating from Falcon and returning to camp, had become either disillusioned or possibly a little bit crazy. Some sources suggest he just fucking quit out of disgust with Falcon, but other sources suggest that Mears was in fact ready to help with the resupply, but then he saw a mirage of a ship in the bay and he stayed at the base rather than return to the depot with the much needed supplies. Regardless, Falcon does not appear to have overshot his mark, but was in fact murdered by his buddies quiet quitting.
I get it. And if you had to summarize what you learned in one sentence, what would it be?
Don't race Norwegians.
Yeah, no, that's a good advice. And are you ready for the quiz?
Absolutely.
All right, Tom. So when we make your catalog into Coldsploitation the Musical, what's going to be the best song on that soundtrack? A, Old Man Shiver. B,
Phenomenal.
Freeze On Down the Road. C, We're Off to See the Blizzard. Or D, Aaron Burr.
They're all so good.
D. Aaron Burr.
That is correct. Well done.
I hate having to go after Heath. Okay. So this sounds unpleasant and all, but Robert Falcon Scott has nothing on me because I've A, tried to catch a train with Heath. B, tried to choose a restaurant with Eli. C, tried to argue with Tom. Or D, tried to think of anything negative at all to say about Cecil for this last bit of my joke.
Cheers.
It's
Cheers.
definitely E, all of the above. Yeah, Robert Scott.
It is E, all of the
you.
above.
Yeah.
Nothing.
All right,
Times
Tom,
five.
when they dedicate the Hall of Oats, they're going to play a
that.
bunch of 80s songs, which will be the best performance. A, I'm Still Stranded. B, Living on the Sledge. C,
Oh, that's good.
Piled Horses.
Fucking phenomenal.
Say that one again. Hold on. It's Piled Horses. I don't know why that's Tracy. I'm going to get so much mail after that. Okay. C, Piled Horses, or D, Footloose.
It's Piled Horses because of how much it cracked you up, Cecil.
Yes, it is. It is Piled Horses.
I'm sorry. That's
We're
rude,
going to do
Tom.
Man Eater, which is by Hall & Oates, but they didn't want
That's awful.
yeah.
It's D, Footloose. Footloose. Got to cut loose.
All right. Well, Tom, it means Cecil wrote piled horses, so he wins.
All right, I'm going to choose Heath this week.
Game on.
All right. Well, for Noah, Tom, Cecil, and Heath, I'm Eli Bosnick. Thank you for hanging out with us today. We'll be back next week, and by then, Heath will be an expert on something else. Between now and then, you can listen to our podcasts on your podcast player, and you can watch Cecil on YouTube, where he teaches you how to spatchcock a turkey this week. Well, not this week, a couple weeks ago.
Weeks.
At this
A
point.
week.
Some weeks in and a time. Watch Cecil's YouTube channel, Season Liberally. And if you'd like to help keep this show going, you can make a per-episode donation at patreon.com/citationpod or leave us a 5-star review everywhere you can. And if you'd like to get in touch with us, check out past episodes, connect with us on social media, or check the show notes, be sure to check out citationpod.com.